So jumping in, we're 10 years out from the initial New York Times story, almost 10 years out. And that marked, as everyone knows, a real sea change in the discourse surrounding UAP. So it feels today like we might be closer to US government disclosure than ever. What do you think about the state of play of that right now? We've got activity in Congress, in both the House and the Senate. We've got support from the Senate of Arrow. We've got the House Oversight Committee making waves. And we've got Mike Rounds talking about passing the UAP Disclosure Act, making a third attempt at that. And last, we've got a cabinet full of people who actually know a fair bit about this. And, a lot could happen. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much summed it up, I think, pretty well. I'm very, very happy that after 2017, I didn't anticipate this much attention was going to be paid to it. We were hoping just to get the public's um, attention when we announced the formation of To the Stars in Seattle. And we had a nice crew there. I mean, it was Chris Mellon was there, Lou Elizondo, and Hal Putoff, myself, Tom DeLong, who, of course, was leading the effort and spearheading it. But it really morphed into just some incredible stuff. I have to give credit, where credit is due to Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon in particular, who really, forced this issue into Congress and into the halls of government. uh, uh, they were much more successful than I anticipated. I was still working with the agency at the time. As a consultant to them. So I was any kind of thing I did on the inside, but not to the degree that Chris and Lou did. So it was wonderful. But the state of play is great. I mean, now you got the NDAA. You're looking at that, or at least looking at it again. Mike Rounds is talking about doing more. It was a disappointment a little bit with the Schumer amendment, how it was amended, but I saw that coming a mile away. There was no way after reading the amendment that they were going to allow that to happen for sources and concerns regarding sources and methods, and then private individuals and things along those lines. So, but I think we're in a really, really good position now. I look at, organizations like yours, Soul Foundation, of which I would hope to be a member someday. You guys will not blackball me. I would like to join, but it's been instrumental. You've had people, of course you've had Jacques Vallée, who is like sort of the house god of everybody regarding this topic. But the new people, on the block, Diana Pasulka, Jeff Kripal, religious scholars, Hussein Agrama. I mean, there are so many of these people that are just coming around to this. Yourself, Gary Nolan, Hal Putoff. I mean, that's really added a lot of credibility to the topic.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for that. Now, you mentioned something when you were talking about the UAP Disclosure Act, which is you said that you could see it coming from a mile away, that they would never let it through. What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to figure out where this thing sets. I am not. Let me state up front so everybody's clear here. I'm not speaking on behalf officially on anything. I mean, this is strictly my views, and I'm not going to discuss where a quote unquote legacy program sits, although I'm sure there is one, and I have a pretty good idea where. But when you look at if there is a legacy program, and let me speak in hypotheticals, if there is a legacy program, and the legacy program is what we think it is, and we can talk about this in more detail about maybe what had happened during Truman and Eisenhower administration, and how this was probably set up. When you have private corporations basically involved in this, when they get involved in something of this nature, they're usually done through sole source contracting, where the government goes to a particular company and says, look, you're the only person we want doing this. We can't put a request for proposal out there, an RFP, because it would just blow the cover for all this. So we're going to go to you and we're going to ask you to do this. In return, what we're not going to do is tell anybody that you're involved in this with us, because it will be considered a special access program or a clandestine operation, right? As opposed to like a covert action, which is basically just influence peddling. So these organizations agree to it. So there's a privacy concerns here, and also source concerns. So if you have the CEO of a major corporation agreeing to take this on with all the risks associated with this, not only at the time, but future risk associated with this. You really want to go out of your way to protect it, and you also want to go out of your way to protect any of the people that were involved in this from day one all the way up to the present. The 25-year, 50-year, 100-year rule really doesn't apply when you're dealing with sources and methods. Those pretty much stay the same forever, and that kind of information will never be released publicly. It may be released in, sort of a dumbed down version to Congress. When I mean dumbed down, I don't mean to say that. I mean to say that maybe at a lower classification level to some congressional members, but in general, that kind of stuff will not fly. And it's exactly what happened when the amendment was changed. They added that little clause in there, and they go, okay, but still it didn't pass because, I'm sure there were pressure from some of the defense contractors, let alone the government organizations that are dealing with it still to this day, saying it's much too dangerous to allow any of this information out. Not just to the public. I don't think that was their concern. I think the concern was, to a presidential commission of whom? A dozen people who may have just gotten their clearances and there's no allegiance and they don't have a history of maybe dealing with classified programs. So that's highly problematic, and particularly if you've been dealing with a program that's 80 years old and you've done a decent job of hiding it from everybody for all that time, and maybe for good reason. I don't know.
Well, let's go into that now, what those reasons might be. But before we do that, I want to clarify some things for the audience and anyone listening. You're saying first that the fact that there could be, if such a program exists, a liaison with a single defense contractor or certain defense contractors if they're doing certain kinds of work, and that becomes that contractor is an intelligence source in that case, or it's treated as a source under the rubric of sources and methods. And so you're saying just under no circumstances, when you've got that going on with a private corporation, does the DoD or the CIA want to reveal who that corporation is, correct?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, I dealt with the private sector quite a bit in my career, and I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, many of them, meeting mostly with CEOs and maybe executive vice presidents, legal counsel, security people. If we were conducting an operation and we needed help, we would go to the private sector. We would go to academics also, anybody, any U.S. private citizen. And one of the things we told them, that any relationship that you would, deem to have with us, would be strictly voluntary on your part and will forever remain confidential. In other words, we will never give you up. And to my knowledge, we've never given up. We've not lost anybody. At least when I was still there, we've never came out and said anything. There was one case where there was a litigation and the name came out of a corporation that was assisting the agency in some reforms, and that was I think the company actually decided to go public. But generally speaking, we will never admit to any relationship with anybody.
Right.
It's like if I ever met with you, and
Right.
when I was working, your name would never come up.
Right. Okay. And so then you're saying there's some other reasons, given that this is if such a program exists, this would be a highly classified program. The cat may be out of the bag, but nobody can say much about it. It's very difficult to identify anything about it. People like me are pretty sure it exists, but I couldn't tell you much more than the top line headlines about it. Maybe a little more as a scholar, but really not much more. So are the other reasons there might be opposition to the Disclosure Act just about protecting U.S. government equities, or there's some other precise reasons you think that might have to do with technology, how far someone could have gotten with technology, scientific breakthroughs, and stuff like that?
Actually, all of the above, and probably then some. When you're dealing with these, waivered special access programs, particularly the unacknowledged ones, you're usually dealing with a subject matter that goes well beyond what you would normally classify, say, at the secret level or even at the top secret level. You're really dealing with technologies or information, I should say, that if leaked or ever came out, could cause very serious damage to U.S. national security. So let's, again, I say, I hate saying let's speak hypothetically, but I don't want to get, I don't want to get in any trouble with my former organization. So I'll just speak hypothetically. But if you have a program like this, and let's say and we can talk more about the history of the program, but let's say you have a knowledge base that's already set up, and now you've contacted maybe 3, 4, or 5 of these defense organizations. You siloed out particular programs that you want each one to work on. They're not really talking to one another because you don't want to do that. I mean, it's an easier way to keep the information yourself. But you're dealing with information, let's say, in this particular case with UAP. So let's say you have a grounded craft. Let's say you have a craft that maybe one is working on, and the Russians might have one, and the Chinese might have it, and maybe another country has it. And they're basically working, they have their own programs too. So everybody's in a rush to figure out what this is, because once you figure out the technology, if you can, you basically are in a position where you can control space, and you can control not only space, you can control transmedium space, whether it's under the ocean, in the sky, or in space itself. And there may be other corollary subjects that we can't even think of right now that might be out there. So everybody's in sort of a race to do that. Everybody's trying to protect that information. So you have that aspect of it, that the national security aspect of it, and then you have the source protection issues. And then you also have, sources and methods. How are you going about doing this? What are you actually doing to investigate, UAP? How is the technology you're applying to this topic working? Is it working or is it not working? Or are you applying a particular technology you certainly wouldn't want the Russians to know that you're applying, because you're making some headway on this? So it's anybody's guess how far we've come in 80 years. My personal opinion is not very far, and I don't think anybody has. I think the technology is so far removed from what we are familiar with that I think if there was any kind of let's say critical breakthroughs in technology, we would have seen it. We would have seen it in weapon systems already. And I mean, I don't think for a minute that Russia would be conducting the war in Ukraine and losing all those people if they had a overwhelming capacity to do what the hell they wanted, in Ukrainian airspace. So they're not saving it. Nobody saves this kind of stuff. You hide it, but you don't save it. People know about it. Ask Peter Cook, or one of the guys who works for, aviation magazines and stuff. They'll tell you there's always hints somewhere what you have, what people have or what they're working on.